So he said, I got all five.
I'm Michael, I'd fire me.
So he said, we have all 5 members. All right, I have 5
Shocking.
members.
They got me.
I'll be ready whenever you guys are, Jamie.
We're ready.
Because they're showing the road.
Well, did you see the emails on energy? Oh my God, no, and then, no, I guess you've really seen the latest one, so.
Good evening. I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Monday, June 27th, 2022 to order. Quick note, we will be going into executive session in a moment, and we will return to open session no later than 6:30 PM. Mary?
I move that we go into executive session to discuss 3 items. First, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Paragraph 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and contract negotiations for non-union personnel. Position of Finance Director / Town Accountant, Anne Marie Ellis. Second, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Paragraph 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and contract negotiations for non-union personnel. Town Administrator Joseph F. Powers. And third, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss with respect to collective bargaining for all town unions, and the chair has determined that open session would have a detrimental effect on the town's bargaining position.
Second.
Moved and seconded to go into executive session as read. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Roll call.
Roll call, sorry. Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Oh, I've never seen me, he's got his cap off, that's it.
I know. We'll make the wastewater treatment center out.
Is that one of your goals?
No, it's the big one.
We'll show,
It's
yeah.
gonna take a lot of effort.
We'll
The
have to-
contract for that's on its way. That's
We'll-
a big
we'll-
effort.
Yeah, we'll have to dress him up something that's clear.
The haircuts come.
Fashion budget.
I was excited to see some engineers in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were.
Most people are horrified when they see engineers in their paper.
I always had a warped sense of reality.
Join the club.
Richard?
All set, Joe? Yep. We all set on the camera?
Ready when you are.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen's meeting for June 27th, 2022 back to order. We started tonight's executive session at 5:30, where we discussed non-union personnel contract negotiations, and one in particular, Finance Director, Town Accountant, with Anne Marie Ellis. We also discussed Town Administrator Joseph F. Powers. No decision was made in that. And we discussed collective bargaining for all town unions. No decision was made there either. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public comment and announcement?
Hi, Carolyn Carey, Community Center Director. I just wanted to let you all know, and certainly the public, that the community yard sale held at Brooks Park is scheduled for August 5th with a rain date of August 6th. You can still sign up for a table at the community center, and it has always been a successful event, so we have that going on. In addition, we have some mini-series we're trying to do, and the first one is a free college essay writing workshop for students getting ready to go to college. I know they're right now rolling their eyes at me. They're not even out of school. But it's in August, and we have someone coming in to help if you're looking for a little assistance in writing that essay for college. So look for some more mini programs that we're trying to do. And if anyone has any talents they'd like to share, we'd love to put on a mini session. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else for public comment and announcement? So I have one, and it's just, with a very heavy heart, I have to announce the passing of Jack Brown. Jack was a longtime member of our finance committee, amongst many, many, many other things. Very likable person, did a lot for the community along with his wife Joanne, and he will surely be missed. Comments from the board, Larry?
Well, certainly he had a long tenure in the finance committee. I think I first met John, Bob, he was the first chair of our community preservation committee. Led that. And when I was on that committee and started that effort and organized it the first time. He also, when we had the failed override, helped me out 2004, 5, I forget now. After that, he was one of the leaders of a committee that looked at operation of the town, how we could manage our finances better. I know I saw Norm here earlier, the fire. He also worked for the fire and through their efforts on that committee, I think added a couple more employees to be sure we had emergency vehicles to get there in time. And as Michael said, he mentored a lot of us just in town politics. He was kind of behind a lot of us in public affairs, so he'll sorely missed.
Mary?
I didn't know Jack well, but knew him a little bit through his work at the Council on Aging, and he was just always there with good support for whatever was going on in town. So we've lost a treasure.
Julie?
I concur. I met Jack when I was first on the board in 2016, and yet I feel like I knew him for even longer than that. And he did so much for the town, and he did it with a great sense of humor as well. So it's a huge hole for Harwich. I don't really necessarily know we could fill that, but what a great guy he was, and we thank him for everything he did.
There was a negative. I moved here from Wisconsin, and he was a huge Michigan fan, which he never let up on.
Thank you. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first met Jack as Assistant Town Administrator. My first introduction to him was his last town meeting as chair. And he came in a few weeks after I started, sat down and said, if there's anything I can teach you, let me know. And I picked his brain and got a lot of good information from him. But he really was just, the good man who did good and did well. And it's a sad time, and certainly thoughts and prayers with his family. But I think he left a great legacy, and much that we would all remember and be proud of.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to move the agenda around a little bit tonight because they tell me I can. So I'm going to take new business A first. And the topic is vote to conduct an interview in consideration of appointment of Anne Marie Ellis for Finance Director / Town Accountant. I don't want to torture Anne Marie her first night in town. So we're going to get to that before we get to the wastewater duo. Joe, do you want to introduce this?
Sure. Thanks for that 30-second heads up. I'm going to get my material together. But I am thrilled and really just pleased to present to you as the appointing authority, but also to the town, my recommendation as the finalist for your appointment of our Finance Director, Town Accountant. Anne Marie Ellis comes to us with an exceptional resume, backed up by professional and academic experience, and I think just right off the bat meeting her, you can tell another good person who knows what she's doing and is pretty sharp. She interviewed very well. I remember one of the things that Anne Marie said is she felt that the interview went too quick, and I said, well, if I can give you any comfort, it's because you answered every question fully and completely. That's when I had a sense that we had the right person in front of us. So I'd be more than happy to go through my memorandum that's in your packet, but I urge this board to appoint Ms. Ellis as our next finance director, town accountant, because she's been certified, if you will, and confirmed by dint of her academic, professional, and overall experience. And I think we'll be thrilled to have her join our ranks.
Thank you, Joe. So we met tonight in executive session to do contract negotiations, where we were lucky enough to meet Anne Marie. We did somewhat of an interview in that room as we talked about what the contract would look like. And I'm comfortable that the process that Joe has provided the board with is the right way to go. And just comments, I guess, from the board before we go to a motion. Larry?
I'm looking forward to having you work for the town. Tremendous as Joe. We relied heavily on the great interview you had with Joel and Megan. Your strong background. As I mentioned earlier, it caught my attention, your employment with Barnstable. I look at them as sometimes being a political hotbed, so kind of a testing in the fire pit of politics, so that was strong. And the financial aspect and the ability to and experience working with managing a group of people is also very strong. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Mary?
As I told Anne Marie, the frosting on the cake for me is she has exceptional people skills and an ability to motivate people. And I think that will bring the town a lot of comfort. So thrilled to have you aboard, Anne Marie.
Thank you very much.
Julie?
I would just, again, echo what Larry and Mary have already said, which is, you bring a wealth of knowledge that the town needs badly, and we really look forward to having you with us. And I think the people skills is really important as well, because it's not all about the numbers. I'm sure you know that better than anyone. So we look forward to having you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Is there anything you'd like to add or say?
I look forward to starting soon and participating and bringing forward everything professionally that I can.
Great, thank you. Who's holding the motion?
I have it.
Go ahead.
So I move that the board votes to appoint Anne Marie Ellis to the position of Finance Director / Town Accountant effective July 14th, 2022, contingent upon the successful completion of a pre-employment physical, background check, and the completion of contract negotiations.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
None.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 4-0, Jim. Welcome aboard. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, next up is back up to public comment and announcement. Wastewater update from Dan Pelletier, Water and Wastewater Superintendent.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, as sort of the opening remarks to set the table for Dan and for Russ, one of the things that I think they'll talk about this evening is the wastewater superintendent, director of health department, and I had a virtual meeting with representatives from Mass DEP, from the Southeast Regional Office, as they're reaching out to all Cape Cod communities and any communities that have water bodies that are impacted by nitrogen, so the North Shore, the South Shore, and certainly all of Cape Cod. And one of the major items to come out of our conversation is that through the governor's directive, they're looking to modify regulations. They're about to enter into a commentary period. So that's why they reached out to us to have an initial conversation. We look forward to having them come back for the benefit of the board in a board meeting. But really the headline is the regulations are looking to shorten the window on nitrogen abatement and success on that. Where we were looking at 40 years, it might now reduce the window to 20 years. And so while these are draft regulations, we have every expectation that they will pass in substantially the form that they're being considered. But that's one of the many topics I think that Dan and Russ are here to talk about this evening. So I promised Dan I'd be the one to rip the Band-Aid off and talk about that 20-year time frame.
You want to talk about the good news first or the great news?
Yeah, we'll pick up where Joe left off. So thanks for having me, Dan Pelletier, Water Wastewater Superintendent. With me tonight is Russ Kleekamp from GHD. Just to keep continuing on the meeting we had with DEP. So there's really two components that they're proposing to change. simultaneously. There is a proposed change to the existing Title V regulations, and with those, they're looking to expand the definition of a nitrogen-sensitive area. That definition is looking to include any embayment or sub-embayment that's subject to a TMDL. Now, with that Title V expanded definition, municipalities will have two options. The do-nothing option would result in a 5-year window that would require all private septic systems to be converted from the traditional Title V to an innovative alternative nitrogen-reducing septic system. And that is not just new construction, that is every property in town, and that would need to be accomplished within 5 years. The alternative to implementing innovative alternative systems town-wide would be for the town to pursue a watershed permit for each of the individual 5 watersheds we have here in Harwich. Now, if we do move forward with the watershed permit option, if you will, instead of doing it in 5 years, we would have 20 years to do it. And within that 20 years, we need to demonstrate a removal of 75% of the total nitrogen required to achieve our TMDL. I guess that's the big, I don't know if I want to pause for questions at this point, because that's kind of the big bomb, if you will.
Maybe I can add just a couple more follow-up comments.
Yep, just introduce yourself for the record.
Sure, Russ Kleekamp, engineer with GHD. We're the consulting firm working with the town of Harwich on the wastewater planning. Throughout my 20-plus year career, we've seen this before, regulation changes, and the difference with this one is normally consultants, towns hear about these things 6 months, a year ahead of time. About 2 weeks ago, I got an email from Dan that said FYI, and we all get a lot of those emails, FYIs, and we kind of grazed through them, but this was one I paid attention to. And, you know, judging by the looks of what we've all heard, is you can imagine some of the challenges with taking a 40-year that's already perceived as a monumental project and condensing it into 20. I mean, it's basically doubling efforts. So, of course, this is new. We want to grasp it. We want to figure out exactly what it means for the town of Harwich. DEP will be making an in-person visit, which hopefully they'll come and present in front of the board, and I suggest we ask very direct questions, and hopefully we get direct answers. But after that's done is how do we position Harwich to take advantage of the financial incentives that come forward with this? That's also part of this regulation is $200 million that they're making available, I believe, through the Clean Water Trust. That goes in
100 to the Cape and Islands Protection Fund, and then 100 to the county.
Correct. So, again, 200 million, it's pretty scary to say, but it doesn't go far in the world of wastewater, especially for, you know, the 13 towns on Cape plus the 2 islands. So I get it. There's a lot of questions, a lot of thoughts. What do we do? What's going on? All that sort of stuff. Give us a few more days, a week or two, to really absorb this permit. Let's start thinking of some questions. I don't know, has the board had a chance to read? It's a 3 or 4 page notice that was sent out. And given the brevity and directness of it, as Mr. Powers said, this is coming. This is coming. So we can have all the reaction we want, but we need to figure out what this means for the town of Harwich. Obviously, we came here tonight to give you an update on the various wastewater assignments that we're currently working on, the CWMP update and some infrastructure projects. But if we have to compress 40 years into 20 years, that's obviously going to change the CWMP. One of the direct questions we had was, for another municipality, is that if a town has a pre-approved 20-year or a CWMP that indicates a 40-year timeline, is that town responsible for modifying their CWMP? And I was hoping for a yes or a no answer. I got somewhere in between, but it's alluding to yes, you do need to revise it. So luckily, we're in the process of modifying the CWMP, so we are going to shift on the fly for that. And but first, we really need to look what this means, you know, to the town, phasing, things like that. Questions?
Thank you. Larry?
Yeah, this is a bombshell. You know, because you're talking our CWMP was projected to be, and it's gone up now, but at one time it's projected to be over 40 years, $230 million. And for a town our size to then double up on that and do that within 20 years, that's going to be tough. And their financial incentive that you mentioned is a drop in a bucket. That's for all of Cape, and that wouldn't even cover what our expenses would be in Harwich. So I'm hoping there'll be, before they press this on us, there'll be a lot of thought given to it. It also, Help me out, Dan. I've missed the last few meetings of the watershed permit activity. What was the time frame on that? Was that 20 years?
That was a 20-year permit. And DEP in the call was actually very grateful to Harwich and Pleasant Bay and the Alliance and all the work that we've done. And they're really modeling the watershed permit after what we've been doing in Pleasant Bay. So it is at least somewhat familiar to us with that regard, but it is 20 years.
In terms of your, Russ and Dan, both of you, you've had a couple of public meetings. And I know I listened to at least one of them, and in that meeting, there was a lot of pressure to add to the CWMP freshwater ponds.
Sure.
Because that was an integral part of it, because we didn't have the regulatory, people got confused on that point,
Right.
but it wasn't left out on purpose. It was left out because of the regulatory requirements of the embayments.
Right.
With the verbiage of we'd add that later. What's that do to that interest from our public? Do we drop that altogether? We try to build that? What's your thoughts on that public input?
Well, so a lot of the public comments we had, there was numerous ones, for example, around the Great Sand Lakes asking to expedite the schedule, saying, 2048 is too far in the future for storing, so this permit will expedite that, so a little bit of good news, I guess. Sorry, Mom, I'm gonna have to call you back.
That was Zoom?
Tell her to chime in on YouTube, ask a question. So, right, the freshwater ponds. What we're proposing to do with this CWMP for the freshwater ponds is modify that to a nutrient management program. Typically, comprehensive wastewater management programs only address the wastewater threats to freshwater ponds, and they receive threats from stormwater, land use, all these other areas that contribute nitrogen, phosphorus, and all the bad things to the freshwater ponds. So the point of this modification in the CWMP is there's a lot of good documents out there. For example, the Cape Cod Commission released the 2022 Pond Atlas for Cape Cod. There's a ton of information. We are not going to recite the Pond Atlas and explain how phosphorus is damaging and nutrient. We know that. We get it. What we are going to do is say, how do we get this information and get improvements into the ground? What are the available grants that are out there? How do you size systems for freshwater ponds? We've already started doing this for Skinnequit and Great Sand Lakes, going around there, identifying catch basins where they discharge out to, and say, okay, your drainage areas are these are the improvements we suggest to put in. Here are the
In essence, you're gonna be looking at, when financing's available, you'll add in.
Well, I think fitting into, if I can just, we really are in unprecedented times with respect to construction in general, and shortening this timeline from 40 years to 20 years, coupled with the difficulty just in getting pipes, valves, and fittings and other things, we're really gonna have to rethink our approach to this. Russ and I spent some time on Friday trying to throw ideas around about what would make sense that we could actually approach this with some hope for success, because to try to jam 40 into 20 is pretty tough. So I think the rephasing that we were planning to do is now going to be completely different phasing schedule. But with respect to fitting in freshwater ponds, I think if we're going past it with a main artery for nitrogen purposes, I think we need to be judicial with the money that we're spending, the taxpayer dollars. There's a big group advocating for expediting treatment around the freshwater ponds. DEP, I did ask them specifically, what does this mean for freshwater? And the response that they gave me was, presently we don't have data that links septic systems as a point source of phosphorus to freshwater ponds, so it's not going to be affected yet. Though I think it's commonly understood that septic systems are a point source for phosphorus to freshwater ponds. They just haven't got the traction that nitrogen has. So I anticipate that that is going to be a subsequent regulation in the near future. So I think it's something that would be advantageous or worthwhile for us to plan for, at least in this phase of the game, so we don't have to go back and do it again.
Yeah. Just one last comment, Michael. I also think it'll be an interesting exercise, because if my memory it fails me sometimes, but initially we were looking at sewering about half of Harwich. And that was based on the ability of the sewer plants of removing, getting down to levels around 3 to 5 parts per million of nitrogen. I think IAs, at least right now, you're considering them successful, and there's some question on that if they get down to 10, 12, 15 parts per million. Which, when you look at the planning, means we may have to add more properties than initially contemplated in order to meet their goal, which is interesting. I don't know how you plan that, how you figure that in, but it's kind of an interesting twist to what they're trying to move us
Yeah.
to.
It's,
What I understand about the regulations from the meeting we had was, it wouldn't be necessarily, we sewer half the town, we would have to do 75% IA systems if we went that route. The regulations, the Title V change will mandate that all 10,000. So if we don't pursue a watershed permit, it's not gonna be quantified as to how many IA systems we need to meet the TMDL. It is every system in the watershed needs to be converted.
so they're using that as a backup to say you better, do
You're
watershed.
not making me feel better, Dan.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to read between the lines, and they've
Well, yeah,
laid
but
it
you
out.
have to work it out. is
Yeah.
what you're saying.
They've laid it out in a way that we really only have one option. If you do the math, there's roughly 10,000 properties in Harwich. There's just over 1,800 days in 5 years. We would need to install 5 to 6 IA systems every day for 5 years straight just to meet, the Title V option, which just, let alone getting them designed, purchasing the precast and everything else. It's just really not an attainable goal.
Okay, thank you.
Julie?
No, I find it's interesting that they're doing that, and I think your point is well taken. They don't think that that's viable either, right? So this is where we're going with it, which actually makes more sense anyway, because we have federal monies we've talked about. So, I mean, if we're gonna go forward, at least we're somewhat ahead of the game, and you've been so proactive that the IA systems makes no sense, never mind the expense that it would be to homeowners, not only for the installation and the upkeep, but the design, as you said. I mean, so it's clear what the intention is. But I think it's even more clear, and we heard a lot of information on IAs over the course of the last several years. And even this, I read about this bomb, and I couldn't really believe it. I kept rereading it. So it's pretty unbelievable, and I think that it just shows that we need to keep going. But 20 years from 40 is going to be difficult, but all the more reason we need to be getting those federal funds.
There was one condition that we talked about in the call that would allow us to go beyond the 20 years, and it wasn't because we can't afford it, unfortunately. The one thought that I brought up to them was with respect to Cold Brook. We're just about to embark on the Cold Brook restoration project. We really need time to complete that and do post-restoration monitoring to really understand how much nitrogen needs to be removed from the Saquatucket watershed. That, they agreed, was an instance that they would be willing to potentially extend that 20 years to give us a 5-year window to get the project done and restoration monitoring, accomplished. So at least 1 out of the 5 we may have a little bit more time on, but based on our meeting last Thursday, I'm thinking 20 years is pretty much it.
Yeah, and we're really kind of looking at another issue here, right? We're looking at the long-term protection of drinking water as
Right.
well as the reduction of nitrogen. So, I mean, I think we all can agree that we probably all saw this coming. We have one problem, but that problem will eventually affect the other. So maybe this is just the way that we're being forced, and all the communities are going to be forced to recognize how important water is, so,
You're not alone.
right?
You're not alone.
Mary?
No, I think Larry and Julie said it pretty well, but I did wonder, to make it that much of a cut, do you think there's any, throw that out there, that's the shock value. Do you think going forward there'd be any ability that maybe it's not 20, but maybe it's 30?
So this is truly my opinion on the matter itself. So we all, a few years ago, heard about the lawsuit, conservation law, it's filed with Towns of Mashpee, Town of Barnstable, and I believe also against DEP too, saying that your Title V regulations are polluting. This seems like a result of that, some way, shape, or form. So I don't know how much relief on this 20-year. Again, these are all great questions for Mass DEP. As of right now, we should start thinking, okay, how do we do this in 20 years? If we get a break, then so be it, but
Thank you.
Lots of questions, I know.
Yeah, any time frame on DEP coming before us? I can't wait for
Fair.
them to come.
Fair. One of the reasons why I had him come in front of the board, because of direct questions.
Well, you know,
Soon. They're saying probably within a month, maybe, I would think in person.
we all went through an exercise of forming a CWMP for 40 years at 1.7 million. That originally, as Larry said, was $240 million worth of work that quickly became $300 million.
Right.
I don't think we're stopping there either. Now they're saying we're gonna do it in 20 years, but they're also recommending IAs, and they were before us 6 months ago telling us IAs don't work.
I think they're
So-
using that as their leverage, basically knows we're not putting in IAs every single
Well,
property.
Great leverage, but can we all be honest with each other?
Yeah.
Because they don't work. They sat and said they don't work.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna be forced to cram 300 million in 20 years alongside of everything else that we have to do. And I've been saying it from the beginning, we shouldn't be passing roads because ultimately we're gonna sewer the entire town of Harwich. It's not gonna be, it's not just nitrogen that we all have to be worried about.
PFAS, phosphorus, the list goes on and on.
But we have a lot of work ahead of us, and I'm not that thrilled that the money's going to the county based on how difficult it's been to get money out of the county so far. And that's all gonna be weighed based on projects that go before them in size of town. Same with the water collaborative, so maybe some of this federal infrastructure money will prevail.
You didn't mention the county funds, that was one more topic. We have a couple more quick items here for the update. The ARPA portal is now open. At one time, we were expecting somewhere around $2.5 million for the town of Harwich. It's down to about $616,000 now. That money's to be set aside for wastewater needs. I think we'd still, now with the portal open, I think it does make sense to go after that for the design of the Great Sand Lakes sewer system. Again, that was the last piece that will be tying into Chatham. We know we need to do it even before this regulation came. I would still like to ask the, through Dan, and ask the board's consent, is that something the town of Harwich would like to pursue, moving forward with the ARPA funding for the design of the Great Sand Lakes?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could, this is under public comment. It's not noticed yet. With the appointment of Ms. Ellis as the finance director, we'll be coming back on the 11th to have her named as the other party with me to file the applications, so we can contemplate that at that time.
And you know what, I totally apologize. One of the things, I understand the town was absent of a town accountant. All these decisions absolutely should be through the new finance director, so we can have a follow-up meeting.
But I do think it's something that can come back before the board on your meeting on the 11th.
I think we need to make a decision sooner than later, too.
Yep.
so.
Okay.
Keep
Larry?
going.
I was gonna say, that's an interesting comment though, Russ and Dan, because, you guys have been working on this, but we almost need a rolling tally of what's available to us ahead of time to start trying to seek funds.
It's changing every day, it seems
It's
like.
changing every day, and keep track of those until it's brought to us.
You can work on
And
that.
and we act as quickly as we can.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
All right, moving on.
Coming to the good news, right?
Hopefully.
Are we gonna get a round of applause too? I doubt it.
We won't
So
kick you
a
out.
couple just updates on all things wastewater Phase 3. Currently in design, the surveyors are out. Those who living in the Phase 3 area have probably seen them in their neighborhood. I met with the Clean Water Trust probably 2 or 3 weeks ago to just talk to them about Phase 3, the bidding timeline, just to make sure we were in line. And one thing that I did talk to them about was bidding the construction prior to town meeting. So the trust, SRF, Clean Water Trust, advised us against bidding prior to town meeting. And I wanted to bring that up with the board as soon as I got that message from them, because that is in conflict with what the town was hoping to do after Phase 2. That said, by going through the trust and the SRF program, we will be eligible for 25% principal forgiveness through the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, as well as currently we're rated as a Tier 1 disadvantaged community, so there's also principal forgiveness available to us through that program as well. They are talking about revising and increasing the percentages for principal forgiveness for the disadvantaged community. That's supposed to be with the ARPA, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. So they're looking to increase that. Just for round numbers, Phase 2 construction, I also asked them about that during that call, and they said that we would be getting approximately $5.5 million off the Phase 2 construction. So that's a pretty big windfall for the town, and it looks like we can anticipate that as we move forward with Phase 3 and others. So with respect to the bidding timeline, I know there's been some discussion about a potential town meeting this fall relative to the Monomoy School District. If we are going to go forward that, it would be my recommendation at the fall town meeting to secure any easements we may need for pump station sites, so that the following spring, May of next year, we could appropriate construction funds to then put the bid out sometime next summer, construction to start thereafter. With respect to easements, another important thing I wanted to bring up, the Route 28 sewer main design. Survey is also ongoing for that. When we had originally laid out or set out to do that project, we were thinking of putting the pump station at the Herring River Bridge. After further evaluation, that site's not really a viable pump station location. So we did go back to the drawing board and identified 2 parcels. One, I've been in contact with the owner at the corner of Route 28 and Depot. Is it Depot? 52, I think it's
Mulford or
52 or
Depot?
54 Route 28. It's right across the street from the old church that's there.
Big building with a big red X.
The building with the big red X, thank you. So that right now is a tentative pump station site. However, we would need to secure that to stay on DOT's timeline to get this project done. At some point, we need to start having that conversation with the property owner as to how we want to secure that easement. And likewise with the Phase 3 pump stations as well.
Dan, you had a preliminary conversation with the landowner?
Yes, I did reach out to the landowner. They were willing to work with the town. In my conversation with him, he had said, "Oh, would the town buy the whole parcel?" So I think there's some discussion to be had there.
And what's the next step on that? What do you need from us?
Either direct the board to negotiate with the property owner, ultimately, or town administrator, or
At a future meeting.
at a future meeting.
Joe, we made a note of initiating that.
Yeah.
So that's Phase 3, Route 28. Also, lastly, one other project that we're just about to kick off, or we've started investigating effluent recharge sites in town. The Board of Water Wastewater Commissioners approved a contract with GHD to conduct a recharge investigation. So currently, we're looking at a recharge site at the DPW property, the land to the west of the power lines adjacent to the DPW property, and we're still investigating a couple other sites within the 2-mile radius there to try to locate effluent recharge.
And I would just add one thing with that. That assignment was $60,000. They're generally 120, but because the Harwich Water Department is using their own in-kind forces to dig the pits, excavate, it's very good savings to the town. And that's something that fairly unique to Harwich. They're doing a lot of the work themselves, so kudos to Dan.
Thank you.
And then beyond that, the hope was to pull everyone together for really a dedicated wastewater meeting. Really, we had been working a lot on planning with respect to the CWMP leading up to this meeting, but that kind of got all taken off the table last Thursday. So we want to really start to rehash the planning discussions. GHD had a chance to sit down with John Idman before he left, so they were able to get some information there. And what we've done so far is built really what's developed in each watershed, what's left in each watershed, and then what we really need to have a discussion about is how we want to fit the town's goals into where we have available room within our existing zoning, or if there's a proposed change to zoning. So there's some more lengthy technical discussions and maybe a bit much to cover at a open public comment. So just wanted to ping the board to see if we could set up a dedicated wastewater meeting.
I would suggest maybe let's get through this initial in-person meeting with DEP, see what that is all about, and then we can have another dedicated follow-up on wastewater meeting.
Larry?
I appreciate that. It's gonna be tough. We're approaching summer, so I think probably you're talking early fall now to get chances of getting a good participation. That's good.
We'll come to the beach, Larry.
Otherwise, no, I just keep at it. Appreciate the work you've done on it.
Mary?
Included in that general, more lengthy discussion, would we talk some more about possibly partnering with the town of Dennis?
Sure.
I mean, they're proceeding, we're proceeding. I still think that would be smart to see if there's a way to share that
Absolutely.
Yeah, all
big,
things
big
wastewater.
chunk of expense.
Any topic we need to cover, we'll cover it.
Okay, thank you.
Julie?
No, I agree, any regional approach saves us money, and obviously it's important to save as much money as we can. And then I've gotten different questions on Phase 3. Do we have a definitive map yet on Phase 3?
Not yet.
Okay.
And we're still trying to run the nitrogen balancing component of it to see, how much we need to sewer to meet our TMDLs. Now, the regulation change also kind of throws everything up in the air.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of a bigger discussion as well.
Okay. So it's still, we just don't know.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I know we're talking about an all things wastewater meeting, but can you send me a timeline and a actions you need taken by this board?
Yep.
I don't think we can drag our feet all summer long and then pounce on this in the fall and get ready for budgets and everything else. So
Great.
the sooner we can do this, the better.
Sure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
The $5.5 million for Phase 2.
Yes.
When do we get that?
So $5.5 million for Phase 2, as it was explained to me, after both contracts are completed and the loans go from a short-term borrowing to the full long-term borrowing, that's when the principal forgiveness comes off. The good thing about this is that when we built our FY23 budget, it was not at least known to my knowledge that we were going to be getting that $5.5 million off, and we had built the debt schedules based on the full note. So there should be some relief there once the contracts close out and those loans get converted to long-term notes, that we should have some money available this year, or next fiscal year, FY23.
Do we have anything in writing from them saying that we're getting $5.5 million?
He had given me the $5.5 million as a estimate because it's 25% of what the full contract amount is after they're closed out. So that $5.5 million was an estimate based on, I don't know if it was the amount we submitted to get approved to DEP when we applied for the loan. But once everything gets closed out and they know the total dollar amount, including any change orders, credits, or otherwise, that's when they take 25% off.
And how close are we to being done with Phase 2?
I just got the closeout documents for Contract 2 the end of last week, so Contract 2 is done. Contract 1 with the change order on Continental and Witta is ongoing. They have done the main line on Continental. They're now doing the main line on Witta. I anticipate they'll be hopefully done putting sewer pipe in and done with the contract as far as Phase 2 is concerned. It's almost July, so I'd say August, September. I think we had a contract extension request through September, just in case there were any odds and ends to close out, but the construction should be done before then.
Be nice if we have a fall town meeting to go in and show people what they're gonna save when we ask them for the next however many million.
Agree?
Yep. Thank you. Anything else? All set. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You want the round of applause?
There you go.
Thank you.
Don't overdo it, Russ.
National opiate settlement. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you see in the package, all Cape Cod towns were advised through the county about a week and a half ago that with the national settlement that occurred regarding manufactured distribution and all the related problems for opioids, the town of Harwich was informed that we would be looking at an allocation of just over $600,000 beginning in this calendar year and extending on through calendar year 2038. It is a payment that starts out roughly in the high 60s and more or less smooths out to high 20s, low $30,000. So, Mr. Chairman, you had received some material from the law firm that you and I would need to work on for the town to receive our first payment on that. And then secondly, I know that there are a number of well-qualified and earnest advocacy groups that would be looking to potentially use some, if not all, of those funds to try and impact upon our community, to use those funds to impact upon the opioid crisis that still rages. So I just wanted to put that information out that we received that notice, and we'll expect to receive those funds over the next 15 years or so.
Other than what we've already done, is there a suggestion on what we should be using that money for?
Yeah, I would defer to Sheila House, our youth and family counselor. As you know, she's our point person on all matters related to the community, and certainly this crisis is part of the community. I know she and several others would like to come before the board, so I told her I'd be updating you on the settlement information, so we can have them come before you in your summer meetings.
But it doesn't say that we have to spend.
No, the understanding that I have through the national law firm that's handling it is it's an abatement to the town, for the town to use as you see fit.
Okay. Questions, Julie?
No, I don't have any questions. I mean, I think we need to look at where it can do the most good.
Mary?
My only question is, I was surprised that we're getting significantly more than some towns that are bigger than us. How did they come up with the numbers?
So we don't have any of that background information yet. I'm hopeful that as we engage in their portal, they'll give more background information. You may recall that I believe this was an effort that was going on at the same time that KP Law was reaching out to communities. So I'm more familiar with the KP Law process than this one. Again, it derives out of a settlement, a national settlement that Attorney General Maura Healey for the Commonwealth was part of. That's why we have the benefit of this, but I don't know the particulars yet.
I mean, I'm fine with that, but I was
Yeah.
just surprised.
Yep.
Thanks.
None.
Okay. All set? Next one's you as well, Joe.
Yep, thank you. Pleased to announce that 1 month from now, there will be an open meeting law training for all boards, commissions, and committees. On Tuesday, July 26, 2022, Attorney Janelle Austin from KP Law, along with Town Clerk Emily Mitchell, and I will be holding 2 sessions of open meeting law training for all boards, commissions, and committees. The training will take place here in Town Hall and here in the Griffin Room. 2 different sessions that will be held that day from 3 to 5, and then from 6 to 8 p.m. So we'll be broadcasting this to all boards, committees, and commission members, and start getting folks to sign up, and we already have folks signing up. So we hope it'll be a great success.
We're sending out emails to everybody.
Correct. Yep.
Any questions? That's set. I'll let you do the next one too, Joe.
Thank you. Just a reminder for everybody that this is the last meeting of the non-summer schedule, so to speak, beginning with your meeting on Monday, July 11th. The board will be working on a summer schedule, so that means the meetings will be held every other Monday at 6 p.m. So that would be Monday, July 11th, July 25th, August 8th, August 22nd, and September 6th, all beginning at 6 p.m. here in the Griffin Room. And we'll have all that information posted on the website, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions? Can I get a motion on the consent agenda?
I move that we vote to approve the following items on the consent agenda. To approve the following Board of Selectmen meeting minutes, February 14th, 2022, and March 7th, 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Joe.
Thank you.
Joe, do you want to open B?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you have in your packet a memorandum to both you and I from Megan Eldridge, our Assistant Town Administrator, and it is in regards to our personnel bylaws generally, but specifically our classification and compensation tables. So first, as you know, the town was successful in agreeing with a 3-year contract with the International Association of Firefighters, representing the men and women of our fire department, and within that was a cost of living adjustment of 2%. So we're now asking the board to carry that forward for personnel bylaw employees to affect a 2% cost of living adjustment. As you'll see within the personnel bylaws that were presented in the packet, I will also tell you that because of the votes of town meeting, we'd be asking you to update the non-union compensation plan table, which now references the Director of Cultural Affairs and the Housing Advocate. And there was one other item that I'd ask the board to hold off on, so you could just, if you were willing to adopt these tonight, you'll see what's labeled as page 9 is the seasonal hourly wage schedule. There's actually a scrivener's error where it shows that grade 3 is deleted and there's no positions. That's actually incorrect. So this evening, what we're asking the board to do is first adopt the 2% cost of living adjustment for personnel bylaw employees effective July 1st, and then approve the other language changes that are reflected with strikeouts and underlines in the materials.
And that was a motion for someone to so move.
So moved.
So, second.
Seconded. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 4-0, Joe.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion on C?
I move that we authorize the preparation and submission of various applications for various grant opportunities related to the Zero Spruce Road, AKA the Copolis properties.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Joe, does that have the chair to sign or you to sign?
Actually, in this instance, and I believe Mark Robinson is on via GoToMeeting, but what the board is asking to do first is, within the documents in your packet, authorize the Town Administrator and Conservation Commission to prepare and submit the applications, and further that the Selectmen certified by said vote that you've authorized me to sign any contracts related to that. So that would require the chair to sign, affecting that change, that authorization, and for me to sign as well.
So did that motion include authorizing the chair and the town administrator to sign? And that's what the second was?
Second was, yeah.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. D, and we'll need individual motions.
Okay, I move that we vote to approve the following special permits for the Harwich Cranberry Festival to be held at 204 Sisson Road. An event permit for July 7th, 14th, 21st, 28th, and August 4th, 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, Joe?
Mm-hmm.
I move that we vote to approve the following special permit for the Harwich Cranberry Festival to be held at 204 Sisson Road. A one-day wine and malt license for July 7th, 14th, 21st, 28th, and August 4th, 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0.
I move that we vote to approve the following special permit for the Harwich Cranberry Festival to be held at 204 Sisson Road. A waiver of the fees associated with the one-day wines and malt license and event permits.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Can I just ask, Ed, is this your request tonight?
Yes.
Can you stand up to the mic? Do you guys rent the space, or is the space donated?
No, we rent it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, we do. And for the first couple of years, we asked for a waiver of a portion of the rental fee, but as we've sort of built up a following for the concerts, we've improved our revenue and been able to pay the full fee. So,
Excellent, thank
yeah.
you. I'm not a big fan of waivers
Yep.
on fees, but because you're paying for the space,
Yep.
I'll support it.
I
Any further
just-
discussion?
Mike,
No.
if I just could, I should have gotten up earlier, but when you were talking about Mr. Brown, he was a very good friend of mine. We had a lot of activities together. One of the things we did together, we were members of the local Kiwanis Club here, but Jack did more than just be a member of the local Kiwanis Club. He was chairman of the New England and Bermuda District of the Kiwanis Foundation, an organization that raised tremendous amounts of money for pediatric trauma care facilities up in Boston and throughout the district. And it was an amazing fundraiser in that endeavor. So
Thank you.
anyway, take care.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Take a motion on E.
I move that we vote to approve a 2022 in-holders license renewal for the Allen Harbor Rentals, DBA Allen Harbor Inn, Inc., 326 Lower County Road, pending Health Department approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. Joe, I'll let you open F.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you recall, you had a discussion at a previous meeting, looking to perhaps modify your, the board's policy on approval of municipal contracts. So in light of that, you asked me to examine what's presently in their policy and to make potential recommendations to you folks. And I think what you have in the packet is the present, potentially modified with 2 blanks, dollar amounts to be filled in by you folks by discussion, and then the prior versions of your policies. So if the board were to adopt this proposed policy this evening, you'd be directing me to approve any supplies and services, which is Chapter 30B, which again is the typical level of contracts, if you will, and level of procurement. Additionally, you could authorize me to execute contracts that fall under the other procurement statutes, specifically Chapter 7C, Chapter 149, and Chapter 3039M. And going from memory, I passed the test, but I think I'm going to say this right. 7C gets to the designer selection, so that when you have a construction project of a certain cost and certain thresholds are met, a designer selection board needs to be established. Chapter 149 gets to what we would consider to be upward construction or vertical construction, and 3039M gets to horizontal construction. And the way to think of that is 149 is buildings, and 3039 is anything that pierces the ground, playgrounds, roads, and things of that nature. So within that, you can see that there's a lesser value that I would have authority to approve on your behalf, and then a higher value that the board would have to approve that was procured under my authority as your procurement officer.
Thank you, Joe. Questions from the board? Julie?
I don't have any questions. I mean, we've talked about this in the past. I'm comfortable with it.
Mary?
I'm comfortable with it. I would assume we'd want to make it effective July 1 with the beginning of this year. And we had thrown some numbers around. I think we came up with 75,000.
I believe we said 75, yeah.
I'm comfortable with that.
I agree. We discussed it before, and we discussed the 75, so I'd like to move ahead with it.
Joe, don't we have to have a public hearing because it's a change of policy? Or does this cover it?
This is our internal policy, so
Yeah,
I
we
don't
didn't
think
have
we
to have
need
a public hearing when
on
we
that.
lowered it last time.
Just asking.
So you do have a policy on policies that could come into play? So, however, it is also fair to say that it's the board's policy, so the board has the right to violate your policies and then take it up with yourselves.
Let's go with my recommendation on this one.
All right, so we're gonna plug in the number 75,000, Joe.
So what I would recommend then is that anything under $75,000 in value, and then, of course, we understand that to be over 75,000 and over would be the other one. And then if there was an effective date, you'd also want to make sure that that's in the motion as well. And I think an effective date is a smart approach.
Julie, you wanna take a shot at that?
July, yeah, hang on. I move that we vote to approve the updated Board of Selectmen policy for approval of municipal contracts in the amount of $75,000 or less, effective July 1st, 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Does that cover it, Joe?
Yes.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, before you begin the next topic, if I could just inform the board, I had directed staff as a standard practice that whenever you had multiple individuals to be considered for nomination, that they be listed alphabetically. However, that's not appropriate in this case. So what you have next is nominees offered by the Harwich Republican Town Committee, which is their statutory right and responsibility when there's a vacancy from their party in the role of Board of Registrars. And so if you look at the letter has their, the candidates listed in their order of preference. So their order of preference would first be Mary Ann Pina, then Eric Carroll, then Gail Carroll. And again, you'd be voting to appoint one of them to succeed Dot Hemmings, who was the prior Republican Town Committee representative.
Motion?
Yes.
I move that we vote to have Mary Ann Pina be on the Board of Registrars.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. Go ahead on H.
I move that we vote to appoint the following designees to the Community Preservation Committee. Catherine Green, Real Estate and Open Spaces, term to expire June 30th, 2024. David Nixon, Recreation and Youth Commission, term to expire June 30th, 2023.
Second, oh, sorry.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I move that we vote to appoint the following designee to the Community Center Facilities Committee. Vahan Kachadorian, Recreation and Youth Commission, term to expire June 30th, 2025. And my apologies on the pronunciation.
It's
think you
pronounced
did
Van.
Do I have a
I
second?
just second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0. Joe, update on Judah Eldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know they're listed separately, but my update is similar for both. If you'd like me to take them at the same time, and then however the board would like to go for discussion.
Same time's good.
Thank you. So for both of them, first for the Judah Eldridge property, as the board may recall, this was an effort that arose out of a Community Preservation Committee application that was approved by the 2019 annual town meeting. However, it languished for a few years, and part of that languishing was because the town did not have sufficient funds to do the necessary steps, which would be tax title research and survey-related work. And so recently, the matter was brought before the Community Preservation Committee, and I'm happy to report that the Community Preservation Committee voted unanimously for the town to rely upon CPC administrative funds, so we can now rely upon that funding source. And then separately, as you may recall, previous updates on 70 Willow Street, even though there were some claims previously that there's clean title, we have reason to believe there is not clear title on that, and recommendation of our prior Director of Planning and Community Development, and a recommendation I agree with, is that the town should also avail ourselves of tax title services as well as survey services on that, and just confirm that it was proper and sufficient so that we have no issues when we go to sell it, if that's the case. And if the board's agreeable, we now have a funding source. This relates to part of the Article 39 at the annual town meeting this past May, if the board so agrees. So for both of these matters, we need to do more work, but we didn't have funding for them.
We have reason to believe we don't have clean title.
On the 70 Willow Street, correct, that despite what efforts the town has done in years past, that it may not survive research and challenge. And so out of an abundance of caution, the Director of Planning and Community Development Director at the time recommended, and I agree with, that the town take the initiative of tax title search and survey to make sure that that's necessary, or excuse me, that it's validated. But also that the town may need to confirm whether this was taken by eminent domain or not. So there's a little more work to be done.
What action do you need by us?
At this point, it's just an update if the board's generally agreeable, and based on your earlier vote on procurement, I have funding sources now. So really what I need to do is identify the project that we call Article 39 from the annual town meeting, which relates to tax title takings and owners unknown, getting properties back onto the tax roll. So we now have a template, if you will, that I was able to get from our own Jim Atkinson,
who spent a fair number of years working for the MBTA, the Mass Bay Transit Authority, on doing these kind of takings. And the town would always want to look to do survey work, tax title work, and then take the next steps of evaluating whether there is going to be a disposition by sale or taking by eminent domain, whatever the case may be. So now that we have the template and we have the funding, these would be the first two projects to sort of try that out with.
Well, due to Eldridge, we don't have to do any action because the action's been taken, we just needed the money.
Correct.
But on 70 Willow Street, rather than kick the can even further, what action do you need tonight? It's on the agenda, so it's reasonably assumed by the AG that an action can be taken.
Correct.
So do you need anything?
I would say if the board is agreeable, that the consent of the board to move forward. One of the things that Megan and I are working on is, as you know, in this economy and the still red-hot housing market, it's difficult to get vendors of survey and tax title and all of that other work for just one project. So if we can start cobbling together bigger projects, we may have more responses to our requests for services. So really then, any action would just be consent of the board to move forward.
Consent of the board?
Certainly.
Larry?
Although if I may, I'm astounded by the 70 Willow, because that was that's been under intense scrutiny by us and other folks for,
It's almost as old as the
Five.
West Harwich School.
yeah, years, and for that to slip by, it astounds me. I certainly consent to move forward, but
So we're hopeful that with this level of work, it can either confirm or tell us what our next steps would be. For what it's worth, the 5 Bells Neck property, which has now been sold and cleared, there were suggestions at the very end of that process that there was not clean title. The town was willing to sign documents that said, we're comfortable that we own it, and if you want to buy it, you can buy it and own it yourself. But these do come up from time to time, so where we're going to be doing so many properties, I think it's a smart approach.
Mary?
Just, you mentioned that you thought it might be easier to get people if you had a bunch of properties. Could we use some of the other properties on that list Real Estate and Open Space gave us? They prioritized, I don't know,
10.
10, was it 10 that they gave as top could we package them all
Absolutely, I
together?
think it makes sense to do
Yeah.
so.
Okay,
Well, I think the overall message too is we have 400 parcels that we're gonna be
That's
looking
right.
at. Julie?
When's the last time we did work on 70 Willow? Did we never do a survey?
So, the board did an action, I want to say, 2 years ago that came out of discussions 2 years before that to clean the boundaries. And I think that was the point where there might have been a better effort to do that, this additional research. So the last action of the board was to confirm boundaries.
Okay, so nothing more than boundaries?
Correct.
Okay.
So the consent of the board is to move forward.
Correct, thank you.
Can I get a motion on first contract?
I move that we vote to approve the contract for Farrell Electric, Inc. for the electrical work at Veterans Memorial Circle in the amount of $36,525.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just very quickly,
Go ahead.
that was a 3039M of 36,000. Going forward, you wouldn't have to do those. So thank you for the policy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0. Joe, do you wanna, since we have an audience for it, sale of 203
Certainly.
Bank Street?
Certainly, and I will tell you that I'd reach out to one of the proposers reached out to me. So where we're at right now is the Assistant Town Administrator and I did the initial review as required back on June 23rd. There are some outstanding questions that I'm wanting to run by council that relates to what I believe are minor informalities, which we can waive, but I want council's input on that. And then there's an item related to another proposer that invokes an IRS code, and I just want to make sure that council can guide us if that's the winning proposer, that there are no issues with that IRS tax code part of it.
Could you elaborate on that proposal? Who it is?
Sure.
Which of the two?
Sure, there's two proposers. The first one is Olga Realty Trust. If memory serves correctly, the proposal was for $330,000. It contemplates, the proposal contemplates an apartment within the structure, as well as partnering with a conservation group and a local historical group focused on firefighting history. They're invoking IRS tax code section 1031, which regulates like-kind exchanges. And so that's significant because that's how they're finalizing the funding mechanism. So if there's no issues with that, then I could go forward to recommend next steps to the board.
Okay. Comments, questions from the board? Julie?
No, I mean, I saw the detail on the 1031 and the trust that's set up, so, and then the other offer as well, so I don't have any questions.
Mary?
Are you looking for questions on the 1031 or the
Questions
proposal in general?
Comments in general.
I'm very grateful to Leo Kukunis for coming forward with that second bid. His comments in there were that he didn't want to see it go without any money or a bid for $50,000. So I really respect that he has that interest for the town, but I clearly think that the Firefighters Association and the Harwich Conservation Trust has put a mountain of time and effort into this, and I'd like to see the project go to them. $30,000 is peanuts compared to what they're offering to do to the town. I did have a conversation, because the one thing that intrigued me was the thought of putting an apartment upstairs. So I did talk to Bruce, I think you're here tonight, and asked if they had considered that or would consider that. And in fact, they had considered that. Specifically, they were thinking a new hire for either the fire department or the police department. They'd have an apartment that somebody could live in, maybe for a year or two till they get on their feet, and keep it rotating. So I'd like to move that we award it to them.
Is that a motion?
Well, I didn't know if we were
Okay.
still in discussion. I can make a motion.
Not yet. Joe, are you comfortable with this level of conversation, given that you're still researching and you haven't made a recommendation yet?
So, thank you. As your chief procurement officer, I bear a responsibility to finalize the process, make recommendations to you folks, and then I think any motion like that would be appropriate. Even though I hear the discussion of the board, I'm not motivated or impacted by that. Rather, I'm motivated and impacted by what I have to do for the town and the process. So, I think a motion at this point would be premature respectfully, because, some of those questions may come out and invalidate one of the proposers. So if that's the case, it's pretty straightforward.
Continuing,
for the town.
continuing on for board members, though, are you comfortable with board members saying what they think? Or do you want to hold the conversation until the next?
Thank you. I think at this point, it's, if the board's okay with my update, I think the next step was for you folks to defer to the procurement team, and we'll come back in July.
Thank you. So I'm not even gonna go to you, Larry.
I appreciate that, 'cause I didn't want to respond anyway till we got more information.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mark
Not used to that,
Kelleher,
Michael.
Mark Kelleher, West Harwich. Whatever you choose, and especially in view of tonight's discussion on increased expenses for the town, whatever you choose, I hope you choose the entity that will pay the largest amount of property taxes to the town going forward, so that taxpayers don't have an additional burden. So that's all I wanted to say. Get the largest amount of tax revenue going forward. Okay, thank you.
I guess I'd ask a question on that now, Joe. Given this one proposal is association and Harwich Conservation Trust, would it be tax exempt?
So the proposal really doesn't get into that, but given the nature of both proposers, it's entirely possible that they may be able to rely upon their opportunities to get tax breaks. So it's not a certainty that whoever gets this, that the property would be on the tax rolls completely.
Just so the board has the information, Bruce, have you thought if you could join us at the mic, or whomever represents the Fire Association, then I'll call on Michael Lock, or whoever represents Conservation Trust. Is there conversation been had about being tax exempt on this property?
We've only had, Bruce Young, I'm the president of the Harwich Fire Association. Mr. Chairman, members of the Select Board. We have talked about paying taxes on this property. We're unsure with our nonprofit status where that's gonna go with the town. There is some laws there that say that we have to pay for a certain amount of time, and then it breaks down so that eventually we don't have to pay a tax on that at all.
Thank you, Bruce. Anyone from Conservation Trust want to weigh in?
I'm Tom Evans, president of the trust. We really haven't considered, I mean, we're a nonprofit organization, and typically when nonprofit organizations, and that may apply to HFA, I don't know, this partnership is a new one. And it's, really put together in response to this specific property. It might appear as though in some ways HFA and HCT are strange bedfellows and coming together and joining in this proposal, but it's unique to this property because the property includes the fire station with which the HFA wishes to restore for use as a museum, possibly an apartment upstairs. And it's a property that has been central to the Cold Brook Preserve and its restoration. On the matter of costs, I guess I would ask you to consider the history of these two nonprofit organizations, which in mission are really quite similar, because the Harwich Fire Department is about preserving life and property. The HFA is an extension of that in its service to the community. The Harwich Conservation Trust is in the business of preserving undeveloped properties and land, which is actually a very good thing for the town of Harwich because it contributes to Harwich as being a dynamic town that serves the recreational interests of its residents and its visitors alike. Both organizations have been around a very long time. Both organizations depend for the accomplishment of their missions on raised monies. And when they raise monies, what happens to those funds? They get plowed back into the town. And the fact is that recipients of HFA beneficence and HCT beneficence are town residents. And so the practical matter is why we may not pay tax revenue on a non-taxable property, our nonprofit organizations are contributing hundreds of thousands and maybe even millions of dollars back into the general welfare and success of this town. I can't speak to HFA, but I can certainly speak to HCT, and we have secured an enormous amount of open space for the good of the town. We talked earlier about wastewater. Which is the one town in this end of the Cape that is not having to respond to mandates on wastewater? It's Brewster. Why? Because Brewster has the highest proportion of protected properties. So every property that we protect, in fact, helps wastewater. It helps those nitrogen calculations. And in our partnership on Cold Brook, the town's own engineers have suggested the possibility that the partnership that we're engaged in with you could save $6 million in the sizing of a future septic treatment plant. Now, you recognized that a couple of years ago and contributed $2 million to the Cold Brook Preservation Project. But if you do the math, the town has benefited somewhere around $4 million because of that project. So when you look at the difference between a $300,000 proposal and a $330,000 proposal, I'd make the argument that the financial benefit to the town needs to be measured much more broadly than in property tax revenue year to year. Because I think what both organizations have done for the town over many years is to contribute far more value than a residential real estate tax. So maybe we'll have an opportunity to discuss this again in 2 weeks. But on the issue of financing and benefit, I just think it's a much broader question.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're gonna pay taxes anyway. So,
So,
at least in the short term,
Yeah.
but thank you.
yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Powers. Richard Waystack and I have been working as a consultant with both organizations. I think it's premature to get into one particular item or another, price or taxes. An RFP is based on criteria that you as a board create. And that RFP for this particular project had 4 different criteria that needed to be addressed. Sale price was one of them. It is not the entire thing. So I think it is premature. I think you have a procurement team in place that we're pretty proud of the work that they've done, and hopefully they will come back with a recommendation. So I just don't want to get bogged down strictly on one item, taxes, a price, those things can be worked. But when you look at an entire proposal and you look at all of the criteria and how have those proposals responded to the criteria that was established by your board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, fair to say we'll be ready on the 11th for this? Yes. So this will come back on the 11th, and I will put it at the very top of the agenda so you don't all have to watch the rest of our exciting meeting. All right, we are on to Town Administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I'd like to report this evening is at the conclusion of this meeting, which is every incentive for me to talk faster. I will be enjoying a staycation from tomorrow through next Tuesday, returning on July 6th. I'm going to play a tourist locally with the daughters as we celebrate, as they know, and I'm proud to say, my absolute all-time favorite holiday, Independence Day. So I'll see you next week sometime. That's all I have to report, Mr. Chairman.
Selectmen's report, Julie?
I don't have really anything except to wish everybody a happy 4th of July and a great long weekend.
Thank you. Mary?
I'm all set. Have a
Larry?
great vacation, Joe.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great vacation. I do have one question, and don't panic. The question I have is, I noticed, and I think in Saturday's paper, we had an RFP for the food truck at Red River Beach, and that seemed late for the season. Did the original one bail out, or was there an issue with that?
Correct. The original one bailed out. We're researching the contract to see if we can make any inroads on damages perhaps. But at the same time, Megan Eldridge was able to get an RFP out there, so we're hoping to have somebody as soon as possible. I think they're coming back on July 12th.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
We can call you, right, during your vacation?
Yeah, you know where to find me. The wilds of North Harwich.
That's not fair.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.